Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the briefing room. My name is Eric Cavanaugh. I will be your moderator for today's event, in which we're going to focus on one of the hotter topics out there in the whole world of information management, analytics and business intelligence in the cloud. So the exact title is all grown up, Maturation of Analytics in the Cloud. We're going to be learning about how that cloud architecture can be leveraged to deliver business intelligence capabilities, much like you have on-premise, but we'll learn about what to do and how to get all that stuff done. And let's just go ahead and start moving through some of these slides here. So quick note, you can ask questions at any time using the Q&A component of your webcast console. So there's a slide about yours truly. And enough about me. As many of you now know, the briefing room was designed to reveal the essential characteristics of enterprise software. And so what we do is we pair analysts with vendors in a live briefing. So unlike most of the webcasts that you'll encounter, the analyst and vendor do not coordinate before the show. And the reason, frankly, is because we want to preserve that natural dynamic that occurs when analysts take briefings from vendors doing new things in the space. So that's why we have this format, and it's really designed to give you, the audience, an opportunity to ask any question you have about a particular technology and get the answers that you need, because let's face it, enterprise software is typically not inexpensive stuff, and you want to make sure you get all the answers that you need before you pull the trigger on a deal. So we cover a different topic every month, and this month the topic is cloud. You might think that everything in the world is big data these days, but of course that's just part of the hype cycle. There is all the small data, as I jokingly call it, out there. And this whole aspect of cloud computing really is putting tremendous pressure on the status quo, on the manner in which people get things done. The cloud is a very powerful force up there, especially when done properly. But of course, as many of you have probably learned, perhaps even sometimes the hard way, cloud architecture is different than on-premise. You have to do things differently. You have to think differently. You really have to go through your entire thought process about what you're trying to accomplish and what the business needs are that you're trying to solve. Because obviously on-premise is not ever going to go away. There's always going to be stuff you keep on-premise and do not put up in the cloud. But it's hard to deny that cloud computing is really having a significant impact on how enterprise software is delivered and deployed and maintained over time. So we have several events this month on cloud. Next month is innovators, and then big data, analytics, and discovery, as you can see. So cloud computing, you know, it's so funny. We used to call it ASP, right, application service providers. And I once asked someone who was doing software as a service, well, what's the difference between SaaS and ASP? And he joked, well, SaaS works. Obviously, that was somewhat of a tongue-in-cheek comment that he made, but we've certainly learned a lot of lessons along the way. The early cloud offerings, some of which did well, some of which did not do so well. But they were out there, and they started this whole trend that we're seeing right now. And if you think about it, lots and lots of stuff is in the cloud. If you have Gmail or Yahoo Mail, if you're using Salesforce.com, if you're using Google Docs, for example, or Dropbox, or all these things, these are all cloud-based deployments. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all that stuff is essentially cloud. So what's happening out there? Well, a lot is happening, and I would argue that taking a hard look at analytics and BI in the cloud is probably something that every major company should be doing these days, because there is such a remarkable value proposition in play. So let's move right along. Our analyst today is Wayne Eckerson of the BI Leadership Forum. Wayne and I worked together at TDWI for several years, the Data Warehousing Institute. And in fact, he and I could be seen at those events sometimes, walking around the exhibit floor, even teaching sometimes. So we're very proud to have him online today. So Birst is a SaaS-based, that's software as a service, multi-tenant BI platform. It can also be deployed on-premise, so that's interesting stuff. I've been following Birst for a number of years, and they've done a really good job of exposing all the kinds of information assets that you can leverage. And I've felt for a number of years that has been a fairly significant hole in the marketplace, meaning giving business users the ability to see in a very clear way which information sets are available to them and give them some kind of workflow to piece things together. And that's something I think that Birst has done pretty well from the get-go. And now they've done a number of different things just in the recent past that I think are pretty interesting as well. So with that, I'm going to hand the keys over to Brad Peters. And Brad, if you would just click on that slide somewhere and use the down arrow on your keyboard, there's a slide about Brad. and your slide should be right beyond that.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here today and talk a bit about cloud and SaaS business intelligence analytics. That was a great intro there, especially with the prelude about SaaS versus ASP. In former lives, I actually spent a bit of time with ASP models and taking traditional legacy client-server architectures and running them in hosted data centers, and that was certainly a nice way to get started, but certainly was not what the cloud was meant to be, and the architectures didn't really work very well there. And what we've seen over the last 5-6 years is really architectures that were built from the ground up for SaaS and cloud deployments, not retreads of existing legacy solutions, but fundamentally re-architected for the purposes of scalable, deployable software development. And I should also mention another nice characteristic about SaaS, the SaaS model and the cloud models are companies that really adhere to those models have licensing and distribution models that incent them for deployability and usability, and that's very different from companies that traditionally sell perpetual license and those sorts of things, whose incentives really aren't about the models that are associated with the cloud, deployability, manageability, those sorts of things. So from the perspective of users out there, there really is a different incentive scheme for the modern companies that are building solutions out there, and Birst is one of those companies that's out there. The topic for today is analytics all grown up, maturation of analytics in the cloud. That was an interesting topic, given that we've been in this space for a little while and we've been working on this problem set for a while. But I can definitely speak to the challenges with translating analytics to the cloud. A lot of the tools and technology that have grown up in the past around legacy components were built in a very, very fragmented way, and adapting that to the benefits of the cloud was not necessarily a trivial thing to do. But it was a good thing to do, and there are a lot of drivers for that. The promise of the cloud is pretty well understood, and it's pretty intuitive for most business folks out there. Infrastructure is something that should be largely commoditized. The idea that your central strength and competitive competency is setting up racks of computers is largely, I think, an outmoded concept these days, and now companies are really looking at building their core competencies and strategic advantages around the business of data, not on the infrastructure of plugging things in. So clearly making infrastructure trivial is a big part of it, and that means hiding the way all this stuff gets hooked together, which is, again, one of the challenges of the legacy solutions versus the more modern ones that were designed to be deployed that way. Obviously, if you can do it in a multi-tenant environment, if you can do it in a share-nothing, scalable cloud environment, that has huge economic advantages over traditional legacy models where single-tenant, one-off, build, deploy, heavy services components. Those types of models are very much forklift-style development and deployment models, and they're a lot more expensive, especially given the fact that the human labor component of analytics tends to be higher than other application infrastructures that are out there. So things which require a ton of integration, whether or not they're in your data center or mine, are going to be more expensive, and those which are designed to be automatically deployed in the cloud are going to be much less expensive. Scalability is also another huge thing. Data is getting larger and larger and larger, and when you go from desktop to server, that's a big deal. I know there's a lot of cool desktop solutions out there that are fancy, but once you move to the server realm, life gets a little bit more complex, and then when you want to do things that span multiple servers and huge data sets, life gets even more challenging. And the cloud is obviously ideal in managing pools of resources to support that. And then lastly, the ease of use component. As I mentioned before, everything about a SaaS and cloud BI company is geared towards ease of use and ease of deployment. In fact, given the economic model of SaaS companies where you're paid upon successful delivery of a solution as opposed to upon successful delivery of a DVD, you just have a fundamentally different incentive structures. Engineers at SaaS companies know their customers, they live with their customers, they know how they're deployed, and as a result, the loop between what a customer does and what the product does is much tighter than you would find in legacy architectures that are out there. So there's a lot of promise in the cloud, but the challenge with analytics is it's hard, much harder than traditional operational applications for a number of reasons. But it's very strategic. I don't have to tell the folks on the phone about that, because businesses right there, out there today are looking to analytics as their fundamental strategic advantage. We're at the backside of a economic cycle, and typically the backside of economic cycles you see large investments in analytics because you can't really trim your workforce anymore at that point. You've really got to make the workforce that you have work smarter. And the way that they work smarter is you got to measure them. You got to measure what's happening in your business. And right now, the central place where data exists to measure your business is in applications. So it's a pretty much a core tenet that businesses run on applications today. They run on a whole variety of applications. Many of those applications are actually moving to the cloud. The fastest growing operational application vendors are all cloud vendors today. Pretty much no company that is doing on-prem software is being funded today, so the future is definitely moving there. And the center of gravity to data is moving to the cloud. But that said, there are still a ton of applications that exist on-prem, and the world's hybrid. It's somewhat in the cloud, it's somewhat on-prem, but it's all application-based. And to the extent that you can go from applications to useful business measurement, you can become competitive in your space. And that's really the way Birst looks at things, which is the core of your universe is apps. And apps are really the tools by which you use to automate and execute your business. Analytics is the way you use to measure your business and then drive operational efficiencies. And the challenge with that problem set is, unlike an operational vendor, is we don't really get to know as an analytics vendor what the data looks like ahead of time. The applications that we're connecting to, some of which are homegrown, some of which are legacy apps that have been configured long ago, and some of which are modern SaaS-based applications in the cloud. All of them who are configured, all of them have different setups than we can completely pre-anticipate. So the challenge for analytics is fairly rich. It's going from connecting to source applications, getting data out of those applications, and generally the data out of those applications comes sometimes once and sometimes comes incrementally. Not only connecting to it, but taking that data, which generally doesn't come in a nice format that is easy just to add up simply in a nice visualization tool or Excel or something. You've got to denormalize it and flatten it and do a bunch of stuff to it to make it so that you can add it up. Then ideally you want to put some sort of dimensional model on top of that, because without that it's very difficult to slice and dice flat models. A single table is nice, but it's not as good as something that is much richer, that spans the enterprise data sets that are out there. And most enterprise applications have lots and lots of different centers of gravity in terms of their data. So being able to blend different data elements from different objects across your infrastructure is very important. And being able to measure the changes in those applications over time, being able to see how objects change, how things snapshot, those sorts of things. Those are key elements if you're going to measure your business. You got to be able to do those things. And then ultimately you want to enable your users to be able to self-serve. So generally that involves building some sort of semantic layer or business model in front of that. I know some folks would argue that you don't, but candidly not all users are capable of directly interacting with physical data, and being able to let business users not have to write queries and be able to self-serve themselves has been one of the biggest enablers to BI and analytics in the last 15 years. And there's no reason it should be any different in the cloud. And so being able to allow end users to do that is pretty critical. So that's pretty important. And then lastly, being able to allow folks, once you've done all this, once you've created a consumable form of data, being able to package that in terms of either pre-digested information, reports, or partially interactive information, dashboards, or even completely unstructured interactive data elements like ad hoc and visualization, such that people can get the most out of those data assets, are very important, and even embedding in applications. Those are all. That's a pretty long life cycle for folks to get through. And historically, in the world of legacy on-prem BI and analytics, each of these buckets was a separate product. They may have been bought by various companies at different times and jammed onto a common price list, but they're different products with different deployment models, with different tool sets, different skill sets required, different training, those sorts of things. And so that's one of the single biggest obstacles to people becoming successful with BI and analytics is there's just a lot of components that need to be put together. And the thing about cloud is that that's a lot of stuff to get working, especially in a hands-off environment, making it work through a browser where you didn't have to go behind the scenes and use command lines and set up, config files and write Java code and stuff like that, which you could do with these legacy systems where coding was a rite of passage. So the first generation of the cloud somewhat disappointed. It was largely, let me upload a full single data set of just one table or collections of individual tables. I can't do much with them once they're uploaded, and then let me do some basic dashboarding on top of them. And that simplified model doesn't really give the value that people are looking for in terms of measuring their business through applications. There's a lot of data enrichment. There's all the elements that I talked about before, and really what we're seeing now finally is the maturation of the cloud model to fully provide that end-to-end analytics model, being able to take data in its raw form from component applications and assemble a meaningful single version of truth across those applications and give people the ability to slice and dice and present data out to folks that they need. The way we see things here at Birst is that in order to do that and make that deployable, you got to put those components in a single architecture, a single metadata framework, a single component structure to be able to make that deployable and deliverable. And that's what we focused on here. It's taken a number of years to do that. There's a lot of R&D that's gone into this. This isn't, go build it overnight kind of a thing. This is something that takes a lot of engineers many years to do. But now that we're here, we can do some things in the cloud that were not even really possible on-prem before, even if you spent the money and had the team of 5 to 7 people that was doing the deployment. So there's a lot of opportunities there in terms of what you get. And by sticking all of that into a single structure and making that end-to-end flow a single unified life cycle, it has a lot of benefits. It has the benefit of speed, not only being able to deploy rapidly initially, but being able to iterate on a common deployment going forward. So not just getting that first thing out there, but being able to get feedback from your business users and then iterate on that so that you keep the thing live, fresh, and constantly adapting with your business. Making it flexible so that you can adapt to the business in terms of scale, scope, all those types of things, being able to connect to any application. We do believe at Birst that the ecosystem of applications out there is incredibly rich, and we need to adapt to your application, not try to pre-build an application just for you. And I think the history has borne that out in the analytics space, that apps are very diverse, and being able to connect to a diverse set of applications is fundamental. And powerful. If you can only do simple things, obviously you're going to top out pretty quickly. And there's a fundamental need to leverage the power of shared infrastructure and shared scale to get powerful analytical capabilities, but and also not sacrifice on some of the good things that we did learn in the prior generation of legacy tools about how you move data from point A to point B, and some of the things that people want to be able to do to data in order to be able to answer those more complex questions. So with that said, I'm going to do a quick demonstration of Birst. It's obviously going to be nowhere near as complete as if we had more time, but just to give folks a flavor of what that looks like from an end user perspective, and what it feels like to develop a very simple application from scratch. So I'm just going to give a sample some of the end user usability that's possible in the cloud. Traditionally in the cloud, there's been a trade-off between, if it was cloud, it was probably simple, static, basic HTML dashboards that weren't terribly interactive, and the on-prem tools were much more interactive and much more exciting. We don't believe that that's a necessary trade-off, and having interactivity is pretty important. So what we want to show you here is just an example of basic retail analytics, a mock-up of a fictitious fruit-based company that happens to make tablets notebooks and mobile phones. Obviously, you can probably guess who this is emulating, but the idea here is just to give you a sense of how one might interact with a cloud-based application. Again, the idea here is not to have it be static. The idea is to be able to give folks a dashboard that has information on it, and then being able to click on various elements and see the interface respond. In this case, I clicked on tablets just to kind of see how my revenue's been and my track record recently has been in the tablet product line, and even I know just recently maybe in the mobile phone product line, how I'm doing there. And in fact, in this particular example, I actually see a drop-off recently in product sales, and so I actually want to drill into that. So lots of different ways to visualize, ways to slice and dice, ways to manipulate, but also to drill. Being able to drill into a view, be able to see it a couple different ways, not just in terms of charts, traditional bars and lines, but also be able to view things in terms of maps. Being able to visually select elements that you're interested in. So, for example, let's say I'm looking at the southeast here because there's a big dip, and maybe I want to even drill down on that to see at a state level how I'm doing, to see if those drops were uniform and distributed. Can obviously see that pretty quickly here. Just being able to manipulate the data in place pretty quickly. I'll show you a couple of other things really quickly here, just being able to manipulate data in a dashboard. I was looking at mobile phones. I was looking at the southeast. And being able to select the data just from the elements on the side, but also be able to modify maybe the data I'm looking at, be able to go in and not just look at a chart, but maybe a table. And if I'm a user, being able to bring in extra data elements that I might want to see. Let's say I want to bring in inventory into this particular example that I'm looking at here. Let's say average inventory by inventory date. Just being able to quickly be able to create new analyses that may not have been built for me by somebody else, but be able to interact on my own. And again, making sure that everything that I'm looking at, if I see a dip in something like inventory, is pretty interactive. So I was looking at mobile phones again, and I just wanted to see the distribution of that across the organization, and maybe looking at the parts of the organization that don't have a lot of inventory, just be able to quickly see that yes, that is being concentrated in the southeast, where I was getting a couple of different data points that suggest that might be a weak spot of my organization. Not a lot of time, but just wanted to give you a sense of what the interactivity might be, and also build something from scratch here. So I'm actually going to go in and take the reverse step here and show that life cycle that I showed in that slide before, going from raw data to dashboards here. I'm simply going to start with a blank instance here in the cloud. I'm not going to show many tools. I'm going to show one tool that does everything soup to nuts and shows everything from basic data uploading to advanced business analytics and data warehousing. So let's create a quick demo here. Let's go into the system. Let's take a data set maybe off my computer here. Let me upload that data set of 8 or 10 different tables, and let me create a simple data model that supports those tables that I'm looking at. Give that 1 second to finish here. GoToMeeting. I wonder if our WebEx is not interacting as nicely here. Okay. Got some tables here. These are raw tables that were loaded from a source. I'm just going to enable them. I got an order table, an order detail table from an order management system. They got a bunch of columns in them. They've got raw data for each order, when things were ordered, when things were shipped and delivered. I've got an employee table. I got a products table. Again, this is not one table. This is a data model coming from multiple different files coming from different places. And I'm just going to join those suckers together in one set. So for each product, there's a category. For each order entry, there is going to be, or line item, there is a product. For each order, there's going to be an employee, and there's probably also going to be a customer. And so I've created a simple data model here that shows my data set here. And what I'm going to also do very, very quickly is I'm going to click this button, Update Warehouse Model, just to show I can analyze the data as it sits, but that's great for one-shot analysis. what people want out of enterprise analysis is the ability to load data on a repeated basis and be able to compare data over time. So what Birst actually did over here on the side was it created, I'm going to process this data while I'm talking here. What Birst did over here on the side was it created a dimensional model, an actual warehouse model for me that contains all the different data sources that I'm looking at here, orders, order details, those different components, and it actually broke each of these sources into its constituent components. So for example, the orders table feeds order facts, it feeds order dimensions, and it feeds the customer dimension. And what this means is every day as I'm getting new data and new orders, new customers, new things like that, I'm updating the existing customer information as that changes. I'm tracking orders over time. I'm accumulating data. I'm managing all that sort of stuff over time. And that kind of automation, which for low-end tools would require endless amounts of scripting, and all of these different data flows that are down here, 20 or so different data flows, which would be difficult to script up or manage with kind of low-end tools, but would also take a fair bit of infrastructure with your more complex ETL tools. Birst does for me automatically. It manages a whole bunch of these different data sets and data steps for me, such that I don't have to do that myself. It's managing a full data mart, data warehouse infrastructure dynamically. And then I can simply go over to the Adhoc tool here in Birst, and I can create just a simple ad hoc data exploration here. Maybe let's look at product sales over time, maybe by quarter. Create a nice little visualization. Let me save it. I go over to my dashboard, and now I want to publish that out for other folks. I'll just create a brand new dashboard, and then I'll just drag that content right onto my dashboard here. And now, and maybe I'll put a prompt on there just to show how easy it is to do that. And I very quickly publish data for business users and created an environment that users can interact with data and explore without me having to build with multiple different products, multiple different infrastructures, multiple different teams. It's all in one place, all in one spot. And that's really some of the benefits that the cloud has for folks. It's really allowing you to bring that entire architecture together all in one spot. So that said, I am going to go back to the slides here and cover off on just a couple more things. What we showed you here was really a soup to nuts application, taking some basic data in an operational normalized format, flattening it out, denormalizing it, creating a dimensional model, putting a basic semantic layer on top of it so that business users could create reports across multiple data sources without actually having to write SQL queries or stuff like that, and then being able to create and publish to dashboards and reports. A lot of stuff all in one spot, in one flow, and that's really where the power, I believe, of an integrated solution and comes through, and the cloud is a great way to deliver that. Who's Birst? We're the #1 cloud BI vendor according to multiple different pieces of research that are out there. We can happy to share information. That's just because we deliver a broader set of capabilities than other folks that are in the cloud, and we deliver a whole variety of capabilities from raw data uploading capabilities all the way through to dashboarding, reporting, and delivery, and also mobile. So, with that said, I think I'll pass it back to Wayne for his part of the presentation.
All right, Wayne, I'm going to give you the keys right now, and you should have them. So just go ahead and click on that slide and use the down arrow on your keyboard.
I don't see the ball next to my name yet. Oh, well, there you go. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Brad. That was a pretty impressive demo. I'm just going to present a few trends based on a survey I did a little over a year ago on the cloud. And for about 2 or 3 years now, I've been saying that BI in the cloud is inevitable, but it's going to take slower. It's going to be slower to evolve, and we'll see a slower adoption rate among users, as Brad alluded to in his part of the presentation. And it's largely because BI, as he said, is a custom-developed application. There are a lot of moving parts, as he showed you in his workflow. So this is different than most cloud-based applications today, most SaaS applications, as they say, software as a service, which are more packaged in nature. If you think of Salesforce.com, at least in its initial incarnation, it was basically, a packaged applications, everyone used pretty much the same functionality. You can now customize that to a certain degree or configure it. But BI really is not like that, and you don't want it to be like that because companies should be using BI to achieve a competitive advantage. So you really want to be analyzing your data in unique ways to achieve intelligence that other people don't have about your products and your customers and your processes. So anyway, this survey, just quickly, so a year ago when we surveyed members of the BI Leadership Forum, which are directors of BI, a little more than a third said that they're using cloud for BI. Two-thirds said they weren't, a little under. Most who were using cloud BI services in the public cloud. 18% were using private cloud, and 30% were using hybrid, which is a combination of public and private cloud capabilities. The top reasons they said they're moving BI to the cloud were speed of implementation. You don't have to wait for the company to order hardware and for it to go through legal and purchasing and then IT to set it up and install your software. That's imposes a big time constraint. The second reason was reduced hardware and software maintenance costs. Obviously, you don't have to use hardware. You don't need a data center. You can access all the BI and data warehousing services through a web browser. Other reasons to use the cloud were flexibility, lower costs, better performance, and other. People who are using the cloud were very bullish on increasing the usage of it in the future. As you can see here, more than two-thirds said that they plan to increase their use of cloud BI in the next 12 months. So that's obviously a harbinger of things to come. The reasons companies are not using the cloud, the primary reason is security, with about a third mentioning that. Some people, for compliance, regulatory, or just corporate sensitivity, cannot move certain types of data into the cloud. Other reasons is, a lot of that has to do in the other category with load times or internal politics. When I dove into some of those answers there. Other reasons, trailing the pack to a large degree, performance, executive support, and so on. All right, so Brad, very good presentation, as I said. I think you guys at Birst have done more than any other BI vendor to show us that doing BI in the cloud in a rich and flexible way is indeed possible. And I know it's been a lot of hard work, and in many ways you guys were kind of way ahead of the market. It seems that the market is coming to you now, and you've figured out all the hard things you need to figure out to make cloud and the BI in the cloud work. So a couple questions. Do you plan to deliver BI packages for various industries or functional areas? Because that's basically the route a lot of pure play cloud BI vendors have taken. We're not going to basically give you a custom app. We're going to do what Salesforce.com did and just give you a packaged app and maybe let you configure it a little bit. But do you plan to offer any packages yourself, say in specific industries or functional areas, or is it all custom?
The answer is yes, but we're not describing these things as packaged applications. In the same way, in 2002, when Mark Benioff was standing up and saying that there was no configuration, there were no such thing as verticals, things like that didn't exist, and that was a big part of the Salesforce mantra. We have a lot of Salesforce customers now that use Birst. That's one of our biggest packaged applications that we work with, and interestingly enough, the degree of configuration of those applications is astounding. The number of custom objects, custom fields, custom components that people have built into those things, and the number of applications that people want to integrate with Salesforce is huge. So the idea that even Salesforce is producing pure applications is largely moved by the wayside as well. I think for sophisticated organizations, configuration is just the way it is. Your business process is not identical to the others in your industry. Neither is your management team nor your strategic priorities. That said, there are some commonalities that you should be able to leverage. And so what Birst is doing is we're taking a twofold path. For certain core applications, certainly some of the leading cloud-based applications like Salesforce and NetSuite and even some things like SAP and others, we've got pre-built content, what we call templates, which give pre-built data models and pre-built reference measures and metrics and reports and dashboards for folks to start with. It's our expectation that folks will then integrate that pre-baked content with their own additional systems, their own additional content and configurations to extend them. We see that as a more extensible model than trying to decide ahead of time every report that somebody's going to need.
Right. So packaging a little bit up on the back end, knowing what source of data that they're pulling into this environment gives you some ability to
exactly, on a source-by-source basis. In addition, we also have an extensive partner community out there. We're building, and it's growing quarter by quarter, and we are partnering with a number of third-party folks out there who are content specialists in various areas, who are bringing additional content specialties on top of the Birst platform to blend with our platform to create some of that pre-built application content.
Okay, one more question, then I want to ask you about your demo a little bit. So one of the things I've always found challenging about doing BI in the cloud is the business model, because unlike traditional on-premises software vendors, you not only have to build the software, you also have to build the infrastructure for managing and running the software. Then you have to work with the client to actually build their environment, which in the BI world is not just build a report, but you have to build the data model, you have to pull in the data, you have to integrate the data, clean the data, and then you have to execute and run it. And all the while, you're not getting your money up front. You're getting it, in drips and drabs each month on a subscription model. So how have you cracked that nut and figured out how to make a buck on selling BI in the cloud?
It's interesting. We actually make money. We have from every data point that I can tell, we have the highest operating margins for a SaaS-based BI vendor that's out there. Because we've focused on those operational efficiencies, multi-tenant SaaS BI, to be able to get that scale. If we were just to take legacy tools and try to install them, there's no way we could make money doing that. It's pretty tough. There's so many hidden costs in this model, and the service levels of SaaS BI vendors are higher than you typically get if you were to do an internal deploy. So a lot of those hidden costs that organizations don't think they're paying when they do an internal deployment themselves, those are actually absorbed by a SaaS vendor when they're out there. So we have had to figure out how to bring extensive levels of operational efficiency to deploying these architectures. And it comes from running the systems better, but it really also comes from automating many of the different operational aspects of managing a BI deployment, whether it's converting data model metadata into runtime business model metadata, whether it's automatically generating ETL, those types of things. When labor is such a large component of a solution, if you can automate out a good chunk of the labor, you buy yourself a lot of operating leverage in the process. So it is definitely a customer-friendly model. It is, in terms of the economics of software, the old economics of perpetual license, pay the vendor up front and the vendor abandons you forever, is great for the vendor. It's a very vendor-friendly model. It is surprising to me, given that the economics are so good for customers in this model, given all that you said, how it is not as well appreciated as broadly as it could be. I think most customers don't appreciate the hidden costs internally and the shadow costs of their organization and the embedded labor costs that are there. But I think the world's shifting as people are realizing the scale advantages of the cloud, and it just takes a lot of work to get there. It takes a lot of operational efficiencies, and we've been at it for a while.
Yeah, so I definitely applaud your courage and tenacity sticking with this model when the easy route would be just to go on premise and sell on-premise licenses, which everyone else does, and you'd be just doing what everyone else does, right? But you've, almost alone, because I don't see too many other cloud BI vendors taking this route, have gone down this path and are making it work. And I do believe, as you say, I agree that the market's now finally coming to you, probably because more and more companies are moving a larger portion of their operational apps into the cloud. And we've always seen historically that, analytics will follow the operations. So if the operations go to the cloud, the analytics will follow. And I think that might be what creates a tipping point for you and BI in the cloud. And actually that was a question, is when do you think we'll hit that tipping point? Because I think you sense that we're getting near.
Yeah.
When will we hit it, and what will be the major drivers? Is it what I said, or is it something else that people aren't as concerned about data security as they were, and that might have been a red herring?
I think to a certain extent the data security is a red herring. It's always safer to keep your money in a bank. Very few companies have their own vaults where they keep their own money. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So if all your payroll data is out and most of your financial data is already out of the four walls, most of your sensitive HR data, all that stuff is already out there. So the idea that your data, that somehow a vendor which is SAS 70 Type 2, SOC 2 compliant and runs through, and whose employees have no invested interest in breaching your data, is going to be less secure. That hasn't really held true. I do think there is a control aspect where many cloud solutions to date haven't given vendors the feeling, or given customers the feeling that that they still maintain control of their data, so that when they put it in the cloud, there is a feeling of they've stuck it in kind of the Roach Motel for data. It kind of goes in, but it never comes out. And that feeling, I do think, is a legitimate concern. And one of the things we focused on very extensively at Birst is how do we make the model as open as possible and as complementary to the on-premise solutions that are there, such that we fit into an existing hybrid infrastructure, so that your data can go back on-prem. It can be leveraged with other on-prem tools. You can integrate. You can manage. If you can do that, then that control barrier of going outside your firewall becomes less and less of an issue. I think that's been a big issue for a lot of folks. I don't really know necessarily what I want to do with my data, but if I give it to somebody else, I'm going to lose flexibility in that process. And I think we've made a lot of progress in making sure that you really can't tell the difference between a cloud solution and something that you put in at home. I think the business model is largely what you said, which is, look, organizations are learning, and they're moving from less strategic applications to more strategic applications. So you're seeing things like help desk and stuff, which are fairly non-core, non-strategic, go first, and then you're seeing more and more strategic things move that way. And analytics tends to be one of the more strategic applications and infrastructures that you have. So it tends to, unfortunately for us, it's going to be one of the later ones to go. But it does feel, certainly, given the business momentum that we've seen in the last 6 to 12 months, it does feel like if we haven't hit the tipping point, we're certainly sliding downhill right now.
Now, given all the automation you've done inside the product to make the business model work for you, I would assume that if you took your software and bundled it up and made it available as on-premise software, which indeed you have, you'd make a killing, because the software's got to be easier to use and deploy. And the quick demo we saw showed just how easy it is, and one single tool for all aspects of building a data mart from top to bottom. So tell us about your on-premise strategies. Is it just a hybrid strategy, or can you compete head-to-head with the on-premise software competitors out there?
We can and we do, but it's important to point out that we're not shipping licensed installable software in the same way the legacy vendors do, that have all the upgrade issues and all the management issues and deployment issues and integration issues that legacy software deals with. We've pre-integrated the solution in an offering that you can operate through a browser in the cloud. And what we've now done is created an appliance form of Birst where that same pre-integrated solution that can be operated through a browser can also be run inside your firewall. Because it is a SaaS solution, it was built to be upgraded in place. It was built such that you can run multiple versions simultaneously so that you don't have to do the forklift upgrade process and those sorts of things, because our customers wouldn't deal if we had to shut our entire system down for a period of time to upgrade the software. That wouldn't work. Our whole development model is based on upgrade in place, and our customers benefit from that. And the same thing is also there on-prem. I would say our on-prem solution is really a private cloud appliance. It's the same cloud technologies that
the upgrades for the appliance, do you push those upgrades or does the customer push them?
The customer chooses the timing of the upgrades. We make them available and the customer chooses when to flip the switch. But it isn't a single switch. They essentially enable a new instance and then they have multiple instances running. When they feel comfortable that everything's good, they just turn the old one off. So there's no migration or anything like that. It's literally, turn one on, turn another one on, turn the other one off when you feel like you're ready to go do that.
So let's talk about multi-tenancy. There's two aspects to it. One, you showed us how you create an application in your demo, and that was great. And you're creating a custom data model for each individual client with custom data or unique data for each client. So how does that work in a multi-tenant model in the cloud so that each company's data is secure? Are you running it all in one database, or does each company have their own database? And if it's one database, how do you interleave the data to make it secure?
Yeah, that's a really complex question, and it's another reason why, building from the ground up with the SaaS model in mind and having your architecture be aware that it's deployed in that model is very different from other vendors who may just, they buy a commercial database and stick it in their data center, but the application is not really database aware. The answer is our customers span data volumes from, a few thousand records to billions of records, and one size doesn't fit all across the entire stack. That said, the application tier where all the logic is, all the metadata, all the intelligence about the BI is shared infrastructure across all customers. It is a single multi-tenant architecture for everything, and that gives us huge scale. And really what we're leveraging is cloud technologies on the back end to pool physical resources for data so that we can scale it to whatever volumes are out there. And we've got customers with megabytes, we've got customers with gigabytes, we've got customers with terabytes, and we've got customers with tens of terabytes of data.
So the application is shared in multi-tenant. The data is virtualized across multiple.
Yes, and in some cases, and in many cases, the data is never actually shared. People have their own little separate. Think of it like a file directory. You have your own little piece of real estate, that has your data, and it's secure and it's backed up and all that sort of stuff. But you don't actually have to be aware of where it physically sits. With our application tier is handling where the data is and where it's moving around.
Okay, in the demo, you showed some pretty slick visualizations. I assume that's Flash, or what is your front end?
We have multiple front ends, so we have a common infrastructure that has all of the intelligence. It has the metadata model, the semantic layer, all the calculations, and all that. And we have 3 clients for Birst, depending upon how folks want to deploy it. And they all use the same APIs. We have our Flash Flex front end, which is basically a rich client front end. It functions, at the same level that any Windows client or Mac client would be if you use those. We have an HTML5 front end that provides very dynamic content. Not all of the authoring areas are in HTML5, but all the rendering areas are. And then we have a native mobile application for the iOS platform as well, so for the iPad and iPhone framework as well. And the idea is to render with the right rendering framework a common set of definitions for what content should be, common reports, common metadata, all that sort of stuff.
All right. With the mobile, is that native iOS, and do you have to recompile stuff and push it before you push it out, or is it just the API that's somehow?
It's the same API, so the server doesn't really know the difference between Flash, HTML5, or mobile. They're all talking the same way, and so as an end user using using an iPad, you're interacting with the same applications that somebody who's using a PC and a browser would be interacting with.
But it's more of a browser, a web-based application, as opposed to something you could you know, because in iPad or iOS, you download the data and you disconnect. Is that possible?
It's a real iOS application. It's not a browser-based application.
Okay.
It's a native iOS application, so that you have the richness of a native app on your iPad. The performance, the native navigation of an iPad is what you feel, not a simulated web thing on the internet.
Okay, switching gears a bit, we all know that some of the toughest aspects of building BI application involve dirty data and integrating data across systems that has, you know, not been reconciled or harmonized. I mean, this has got to be a huge problem area for you because, you know, it's kind of like renovating a house. Once you open up the walls, you have no idea what's inside, right? So you could get a client that's got the worst data in the world and you didn't know it up front. So how do you handle
that? Never happens.
Yeah, well, okay.
Just kidding, obviously. So we have to deal with that. I mean, that's the reality, is that data is generally very normalized. It's very optimized for its source applications, and each application sees data very differently. And very often, the data in the source applications has holes. It's not coded the same way. There's all sorts of little messiness behind the scenes. And you know, there's no automated tool that magically makes all of that go away. Our approach has been to automate the creation of a dimensional model, automate the creation of the star schema infrastructure that you would traditionally have to build by hand, automate the handoffs to the various different tools, and then create high-level tooling for folks to specify how they want to do those types of transformations. So if they want, and I didn't show the transformation capabilities as well, but if you know, there is the ability and obviously necessity to take data and link it to different sources, you know, denormalize it, do lookups, transforms, cleansing, those types of things as well, and we definitely do that. And what I also didn't mention is that I showed structured sources, but also in Birst we can model unstructured sources. We also do store data in Hadoop for unstructured content as well, and can do, you know, unstructured modeling as well. And all of that requires, you know, some degree of modeling on top of those sources to extract and cleanse the content that's there. And our goal is to eliminate unnecessary physical infrastructure steps that you would find with legacy ETL tools. But you obviously can't make it completely go away. There is some integration work that's required.
Yeah, so you answered a couple of other questions we've touched on, which is big data, unstructured data. So you've added some capability to parse semi-structured data.
Unmodeled, semi-structured unit, yeah. I mean, basically, you know, the ability to take Birst ETL framework and use it to generate MapReduce operations on big data to generate structured content that can then flow through the rest of the Birst pipeline.
Yeah, we touched on scalability and how you virtualize data across multiple servers.
We do that, and also the data sets itself, because of the way we divide data into fact and dimension, it naturally partitions data, so Birst ends up partitioning data in a way that we can scale across many, many different commodity databases, large data sets. So when you get into the hundreds of millions of records and billions of records, you know, typically you want to run those on many machines, not one, and we have some natural ways of doing that.
So the data environment that you use, is that your own, or is that some third-party service provider, and is that running on Hadoop or a commodity? You know, what is the data processing environment you use to run things?
It's a little more complex than that. There's multiple components. The unstructured stuff is Hadoop. The structured stuff at the base level are commodity commercial databases. But through our application tier, we've parallelized them so that we get additional scale out of them.
I guess the last question I have is on competition. Maybe you could tell everyone who do you run up against the most out there? Who do you see as your biggest competitor?
Our biggest competitors are the on-prem guys who are selling, you know, independent BI solutions by themselves. There are legacy vendors, I probably don't need to name their names, who can sell ERP packages and then you know, slide in a BI tool set along with it, and we're not going to see those. You know, but when you're really doing a real bake-off of BI tools, there are vendors that you generally see in those environments, and those are the guys we see. We see that I would say the top end of the discovery tool segment, where people are trying to stretch some of those tools well beyond what they were meant to do. You know, some of the quote-unquote in-memory solutions that are out there, and then we also see the traditional rollout vendors that are out there as well. You know, obviously some of the legacy guys that are part of the mega vendors, and then you know there are a couple of independents that we traditionally see.
Well, that was a good answer, especially since you found a very diplomatic way to sidestep naming the names. That's good. Hey, Eric, I'm going to pass it back to you to see if we have any questions from the audience.
And we certainly do. We have a whole lot of great questions. So let me just go ahead. I'll start at the top and kind of work my way down. Here's sort of a general question. What are some of the biggest challenges faced when moving to the cloud? What is most often overlooked, one attendee asks?
I don't think it's the cloud in and of itself that is the biggest issue. I think that there is you know, we're typically seeing net new implementations that people are putting in the cloud. People don't generally take an existing BI solution and just shut it down and rebuild the exact same thing. So most of the issues are around, you know, building a new BI solution around a known set of applications. But sometimes there are cultural things. I would say that with Birst, our methodology is agile. Which is because the whole thing's integrated top to bottom, the metadata all the way from the ETL to the dashboards is one thing, and the same developer can work top to bottom. There's a different methodology than you would traditionally find with legacy tools that are out there, and we typically try to push rapid deployment cycles where people are getting bits of functionality out on a regular basis and then repeating that. So like a discovery tool may get one thing done and then that's it. A legacy tool might take 3 years to get your first thing out. Our model is let's do the first thing in a few weeks to a month, but let's keep rolling new things out every few weeks to a month on top of that. And that mindset is a bigger shift because most groups that we see are generally very used to the waterfall style of development and shifting to a more agile process and getting your business users to think about, hey, we're not going to get all at once. We're going to do it incrementally, and we're going to get pieces out there, and we're going to make sure we get it right as we go. There are some cultural aspects that generally we don't get, you know, generally it takes a little bit of learning. People get better at it, but it doesn't happen the first time.
So, Brad, this is interesting. Do you assign a project manager from your company to work with a client, and that project manager basically creates a Scrum team, and then you do development like any other Scrum team that would operate internal to a company? How does that work with you guys?
We do when we do the deployments. When we have partners that do deployments, you know, they use whatever methodology that they feel most comfortable with. But yeah, we work with them to run it that way. And we do find some companies just aren't comfortable with that more agile methodology, and you know, we do revert sometimes to a more waterfall method when we need to.
But it is set up no matter who runs it, whether it's you or partner, or I suppose the client themselves can do it if you turn the keys over to them, right? It's run as basically a project with kind of a custom consulting engagement.
There is generally some sort of project associated with it. I mean, there are at the low end. We have a free version of the product. You can go to Birst and use our Birst Express Edition for free. In which case, there's no engagement. You just load data and go. But when we're connecting to more sophisticated applications, either we do it, we provide some training for the customer to do it, and then they run a project, or partner does. But when you're connecting to an application and you're going to integrate 50 to 70 tables, and you're going to do, hundreds of millions of records, generally you want to build a project around that.
Now, does that project management cost extra, or is that built into the subscription price?
It's not in this. There's a separate component for that. Obviously, there's depending upon what you want to do, or depending upon where you want to go, because these things, you may have different strategic priorities than your competitors or other folks that are out there. You may want to do something that's different. So we we separate that out to make it clean, so that the product is the product, and whatever business solution you want, if it's, we'll gear that to what your needs are.
Then you're on a subscription basis. But to
Absolutely.
get it up and running, it's a project.
Absolutely. And, some of our customers do opt for, let's just take some training and let's go do it ourselves, in which case it's, pure subscription.
Okay, good. Let me keep moving through some other questions here. So one of the questions is about who winds up serving as an advisor to make this happen? And I think the question is really, do your customers find that they need to have a third-party consultant give a thumbs up on stuff? One of the attendees mentioned TDWI, graduates, for example. I mean, do you find that there is a need for some third-party validation beyond obviously just what you say to a particular prospect in order to get them to move forward?
Well, we haven't needed it. We've been able to certainly get a number of customers to move forward without that, but obviously life's a lot easier when you have folks that you're working with that are providing another voice that's agreeing with you. That's one of the reasons we're investing very, very heavily in our partner network. We have actually a pretty significant partner team and a nice partner ecosystem that's building, because we want third parties that are out there to develop their own opinions on best practices and methodologies, and we want to enable them to be the trusted third party for the customer. Our expertise is in building, automated analytical solutions.
Yep. Okay, good. And another good question, what about data governance? Who owns data governance, and how is it implemented when you go to a cloud-based model? Is it a different kind of setup? Is there an additional choke point, so to speak, or how does that work?
I would say it really depends on the company. The fact that the infrastructure is in the cloud doesn't really change data governance. Data governance is largely, a business process, and it's ensuring that the right constituencies are involved in making sure that the data is clean, it represents the right semantic content, it has the appropriate components, and it runs to the right checks and balances. The infrastructure to support those checks and balances is there in the cloud now, certainly with a product like Birst, but you still need the business processes. And whether it was Birst or any name your legacy solution, a huge chunk of that burden still is an on-prem business process that you have to manage.
Okay, good. Another question from the audience. One attendee asks, considering that Tableau is on-premise, do you provide functionalities which they do not? I realize it's slightly an apples and orange kind of a question, but
yeah, we provide a persistent data store that actually has a real dimensional model. We have this thing called a warehouse that they don't have a concept of. We support real rollup, or our system generates queries. We have a reporting tool that actually does reporting and pixel perfect reporting. We support a push model. We have a natural dashboarding environment that was designed for that, not for self-discovery. That's a great self-discovery tool, but when producing content for the consumption by others, that's our model. There's a lot of stuff that we do, to name a few.
All right, good. And we have a couple other really specific questions. Let's see. Many BI vendors find that internal use of Excel is their biggest competitor. Do you find that to be true as well, and how do you deal with that?
Absolutely. And not just Excel, the Excel business process, because it's so free and chaotic that people feel like they can do whatever they want with it. And the fact that they can get by with Excel on any level means that they're able to function at least in some way with Excel. So your biggest challenge as a BI vendor is to do nothing. It's not so much how do I get into a compete and beat another vendor. That's nice. We do very well in that regard. It's really helping to help someone understand that weekly time suck that consumes someone's life for 2 to 3 days, manually doing certain non-interactive, non-exploratory, hand-built data models doesn't scale and doesn't give you the strategic insight you need to make the right business decisions. Some organizations are more comfortable with that. Some organizations can view that as a second-tier priority, and part of our challenge is helping folks understand the strategic value of BI, not just the tactical value of reporting. I think for organizations that understand analytics versus reporting, this is very natural. For folks that view anything with numbers in it as analytics, because it's and reports and dashboards are the same thing, it's harder.
Okay, good. Here's more of a general question about cloud. While cloud apps are becoming more apparent year by year, which areas of cloud computing still need more maturation to be readily available, whether it's infrastructure, development, storage, reporting, et cetera? Any thoughts on that?
The biggest single challenge in cloud infrastructure in general, and I'm speaking out of the BI world, is just I/O and storage. I mean, if you look at what Amazon and those guys are, Amazon just published this new thing where they have new stats on how many IOPS their things deliver. Well, that's because if you actually try to run anything of useful analytics on Amazon, the I/O performance is so slow, you get terrible performance. The infrastructures in the cloud have historically been optimized for, guess what, transactional operational systems, as which usually get the benefit first, and analytics usually comes second. What we're looking, I think what most people look for, and what we've had to build custom solutions for, is how do you handle the fact that in an analytical environment, any one person can press a button and have to span vast quantities of information sitting on disk somewhere and aggregate that quickly. That requires a different focus of infrastructure than I think what most cloud infrastructure is focused on today.
Okay, good. And let's just kind of burn through the rest of these questions here. So here's a really good one. If someone is using it for a while and then wants to switch out, how does that process work? What do you deliver to someone whose solution you have been hosting if they decide they want to go with a different vendor?
This is actually one of the advantages here at Birst. Any solution that you pick that has a proprietary data store, including the on-prem vendors, you're kind of left in the cold if you ever want to switch. There are multiple roach motels for data on-prem and in the cloud, and the challenge with that is your data. If you invest in this thing as data infrastructure, you're done if you do want to switch, because under the covers of Birst is an actual relational database model, and we're building a modern data mart data warehouse. If customers do choose to leave, they get that. They get that data infrastructure. They get the database. They get all that investment back, and they can bring it back on-prem whenever they want. What customers have the option of doing is going from the cloud, moving back on-prem with the appliance, and continuing to run the app. And if they want to shut down the app and just continue with the data infrastructure, they can do that as well. Fortunately, that doesn't happen as a practical reality, but it gives people a lot of security knowing that they're investing in their data, not necessarily a company.
Okay, good. And let's see. What about business activity monitoring in some of these events or in some of these solutions? Are you seeing BAM in cloud-based analytics?
A little bit. I think cloud is getting to the point where there's a number of different applications in different places, and there are some folks that are specializing in BAM. What we tend to view the world from more of a BI perspective, which is let's take data from a variety of sources and let's aggregate and run analytics across that data. There are some folks that want real-time or near real-time analytics on top of that data that's there, and we do have infrastructures to support that. But it's not as focused on one event at a time, and there are some solutions out there that I think that are focused more explicitly on that infrastructure.
Okay, good. And just a couple more here. Let's see. Do you offer a private cloud-based solution?
Yeah. I mean, that's what our appliance is. It's designed to be slotted into private clouds. So if you have pools of if you have an ESX server farm or whatever it is, you can just drop Birst right into that and create your own on-prem SaaS BI solution that has all the capabilities of a full SaaS solution, where you can run centrally many BI deployments from one piece of shared infrastructure and get the same economic benefits that we get in the cloud. That's possible.
Okay, here's a very specific question. Do do you consider the conversion from relational model tables to a dimensional model as an ETL process, or are there some other functionalities that come into play?
They're sort of orthogonal. I mean, the dimensional model sits on top of, is irrespective of how the data is actually stored. You can do dimensional models in cube-based physical infrastructures. You can do dimensional models on relational infrastructures, which is how we've implemented it. But fundamentally, the infrastructure tables can be organized dimensionally depending on how you set that up. And what Birst is actually doing is restructuring the data in those tables into a dimensional model.
Okay, good. And just two more questions. Do you support hybrid clouds? And the last question is, what about Birst versus ClickView? What kind of a competitive landscape exists there?
I love the second one. We've got some great literature on that. You can come to burst.com, and we've got some white papers and some things that we'll share some nice side-by-side comparisons. Click is a really nice desktop discovery tool that has been morphed into a server version, but it wasn't designed for scalable, complex, rich data sets. The whole QVD hell problem is really part two of the cube explosion issue that we saw in the latter part of the 90s, early part of the 2000s. It really wasn't designed for rich, complex enterprise data models. And I think Click's acknowledged that with its Expressor acquisition, that it's trying to kind of sit on both sides of that fence. So we got some good information out there about that. In terms of, what was the first question that you had there?
The first question was hybrid cloud environment.
Oh, hybrid cloud. Actually, we see hybrid cloud probably about 30% of the time, which is move some data into the cloud that hasn't been modeled before, that doesn't have any data model associated with it. Load it to the cloud, and we'll turn that into a dimensional model in our cloud, and we'll build that out there. And then connect locally to data that exists that already has some sort of database infrastructure. So if you've already got an existing database infrastructure, there's no reason to move that. Let's just connect to it, sit on top of it, and just map to it and blend the two of those together. So Birst provides the ability to do both, which is we have this notion of a semantic layer that can map to stuff that's in our cloud and also can map to stuff that's on-prem. And that gives us something we see quite often because, if you've invested in a 100 terabyte Teradata infrastructure, you're probably going to want to keep that where it is. So let's help you leverage that and create some infrastructures to get some scale so that users can access that stuff, but we don't want to move the data.
Yep. Okay, good. And one last-minute question just came in, which is actually a good one, and we'll close on this. One of the attendees writes, we have multiple operational systems hosted with various vendors. Will that complicate implementing a BI app in the cloud?
No. I mean, there's nothing about the cloud that makes that any more complex. The key ingredient there is whether the solution you choose has the data integration capabilities to be able to create a single model which incorporates data from multiple applications. This is actually something Birst specializes in. In the cloud world, when we connect to apps like Salesforce and NetSuite, they all have built-in basic reporting. But the key capabilities that those applications lack are the integration of those apps plus other apps. And the common use case of Birst is multiple applications brought together into a single dimensional model such that you can report across both. That is actually the core use case that we typically see.
Okay, good. Well, folks, we have burned through 73 minutes here. A lot of wonderful, very specific questions from our audience. Big thank you to Wayne Eckerson for his time today. Big thank you to Birst for stepping into the briefing room. I will post a link to the slides one last time here for those of you who did not get that. So just hang on for a second. I'll post that right now, in fact. And we do archive all of these events. So you can go to insideanalysis.com, look under Webcasts, under Briefing Room, and you'll see a link there to recent episodes. All the events that we do are archived there. You can check them out. And we usually have the archive up fairly quickly. We've actually sold 41 briefing rooms this year, which is pretty good considering we only do them on Tuesdays at 4 o'clock Eastern. So big thanks to all of you out there for your time and attention today. Of course, it's a big day here in the United States with the election, so if you haven't voted yet, by all means vote. And thank you so much for your time and attention, folks. We will catch up to you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.